Hey listeners, be sure to check out slippedisc.com for the latest in classical music now. Before this episode starts, I wanted to let you know that it was recorded in front of a live audience in New York City at Lincoln Center as part of their Hear It Here podcast festival this past April. We had a great turnout for a really fun and in-depth conversation. So here it is. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed speaking with Joyce. Three-time Grammy Award-winning American mezzo-soprano Joyce DiDonato captivates audiences worldwide with her enchanting voice and transformative stage presence. She's known for singing solo arias, but her profound appreciation for music was kindled by her first musical love, singing in a choir.
Every voice in that choir is invaluable, but they all need each other to make it work. It's the perfect blueprint for me about how to go into the world. It's like everybody has their purpose and their own voice, but together you can make harmony.
You're listening to Speaking Soundly, a backstage pass to today's biggest stars of the music world. I'm your host, David Krauss, principal trumpet of the Metropolitan Opera. During each episode, you'll hear me speak with inspiring performers about their creative process and the personal journey that led them to the stage. Nice to see everyone. Thank you to Lincoln Center's Hear It Here series, Artful Narratives Media for supporting this conversation, and thank you, Joyce. I'm honored that you would do this, and quite frankly, amazed that you were available, because I know you have like 2 free nights every solar eclipse. So thank you for spending one here with us tonight.
Thank you, David.
So I want to talk about, to start off, an aspect of your career that is fairly commonplace to you, but very foreign to most people on the planet. And that is walking into a room and receiving thunderous ovation. What does it feel like, for example, when the curtain of the Met Opera opens and you're facing nearly 4,000 people who launch to their feet and cheer for you? Does it ever get old?
No, for sure it doesn't ever get old. And it's so funny. We performers, I don't know if I'm completely unique. I think I have this in common with a lot of performers, is that usually we expect no applause. Like we think, oh, they're going to hate it. Oh, I hope they applaud. I don't know what's going to happen. And there's a sense of dread sometimes. So there is a sense of relief. And I'm not being falsely kind of modest. There is a sense of every time we go on the stage, it's new, and you have to prove yourself every time. And so there is a sense of relief. And then there's great joy, because if there is that level of feedback and giving back to those of us that were on the stage, I mean, you get flooded with gratitude. I will say there are certain theaters where even if you show up as David Krauss or Joyce DiDonato, they don't automatically give you applause. Some theaters do.
Which theaters?
Well, I go home to my lovely Kansas City Symphony, and I can walk out and I can go, and they would applaud. You go to, for example, Teatro Colón in Buenos Aires. That is an audience that has heard it all, that knows it all, and they say, we love you, but you better sing tonight. And there's a sense of okay, because they know everything that you're trying to do as an artist, and they don't just automatically give it to you. When that kind of applause comes, it's deeply gratifying.
Right.
Yeah.
As an orchestra member in the pit, I'm in a great spot. I'm not in the audience, but I'm not on the stage. I'm in between you and the audience, and I've seen a lot of opera singers take a lot of bows, and most of them really make a meal out of it. I mean, it's something to behold. But when you take a bow, there's something different. There's a look on your face like you've just been through something, and you're emerging in that moment. For example, this past fall, when you sang Dead Man Walking, which was amazing. Oh. It's a really light opera. It's a 3-hour opera about a nun who's counseling a convicted felon on death row. It's intense. And it ends with you alone singing a church hymn in the dark after witnessing an execution. The audience is silent, the lights go out, and for about 10 seconds, nothing happens until the curtain comes up, and you're there to welcome this thunderous applause. So I want you to take me into those 10 seconds between the end of the opera, where you're Sister Helen, and seconds later, you're supposed to be a smiling Joyce. Like, how does that transformation happen?
I don't think Joyce enters maybe until I leave the stage and come back on, because in this case, they just brought the curtain up, and Ryan McKinney, who was playing Joe Desrochers, he would have to be unstrapped from the gurney. We would hug each other. We were usually in tears because it's such a journey that is taken together. And in this case, it doesn't feel like applause. I even know we could see people in the audience. Some people weren't able to applaud. They were still in tears. But I think it was the familiar gesture of saying we were all here together. We all experienced this together. And it's this moment of trying to find our way to come back into the real world. So in this case, it never felt like, oh, you love me, you love me. It really felt like those of us in this room for this show will never forget being here and sharing this experience together. And that's the holy grail of a performance, yeah.
I think part of your charm as a performer is that on stage, you're a larger-than-life presence who can move mountains with your voice, but in reality, you're this soft-spoken woman from Prairie Village, Kansas. I fought really hard to get rid of my Long Island accent, extremely hard, my entire life. I wonder if you had fought just as hard to retain that small-town nature of Prairie Village as you tour the world, or will that just be always a part of you?
I think it's always a part of me, but I'll put on your Long Island accent, all right, David? I'll do that. I would have never gotten rid of it.
Don't do that.
Never. Is that Brooklyn? I don't know. It certainly has never been a conscious decision, but I like my Midwestern boots and this sense of not being afraid of hard work, and the sense that everybody involved in the process is equally important, nobody more than the other. I mean, we've been in rehearsals for the hours in these days, and it's a huge game. Yay! Thank you. It's a huge cast, and it's not only the three ladies, an extraordinary auxiliary cast as well. All of us have covers that are in the room. There's a group of dancers that do beautiful work in this, and they all have covers. And there's actors that are participating, and they have covers. And there's stage management and props, and then there's 3 people on the music staff. And I love being in the room there and knowing everybody has a purpose. And I think that's something that was instilled in me in my, Midwestern Prairie Village upbringing. I like it.
Well, I grew up 20 miles from here. In fact, my grandma lived across the street on Broadway and 63rd Street for a number of years.
Wow.
But Kansas is a world away from Lincoln Center. What is Prairie Village, Kansas like?
It is a suburb of Kansas City, and it is green lawns and oak trees and, 1950 ranch houses, where my church was up the street. There was a mall down the street. The pool was half a mile away. Everything was there. It was come home when the street lights turn on, forts with the neighborhood kids. I mean, it was, I won't say completely Leave It to Beaver ideal by any means, but it was a very privileged upbringing in that sense of safety and play.
And you're one of 7 children raised in a large Irish Catholic family. which was also a very musical household. So in your family, who played what, and what was your earliest musical influence?
So my two older, I'm number 6. My two older sisters were trained in classical piano. My dad was the volunteer church choir. My mom was, I didn't know her as an organist, but that's how they met early on. She was busy raising 7 kids, so she didn't practice the piano too much. And, you know, my father was listening to the classical music station when he was working from home as an architect. Sunday nights was Glenn Miller for cocktail hour. My sisters were upstairs listening to Barbra Streisand, Billy Joel. My brother was in the basement listening to Def Leppard and AC/DC and whatever. So I was exposed to all different kinds of music. And I feel like it was my first language.
In high school, you loved singing in choir. In fact, by senior year, you wanted to be a choir director, so you looked at schools with music education in mind. Yeah. And of course, now when you sing solo arias, but singing in a choir is very different. It's not in the spotlight. What do you miss most about singing elbow to elbow with other people in a choir?
I'm trying to bring more of that into my world again because I have missed it. It's that sensation of every voice in that choir is invaluable, but they all need each other to make it work. It's the perfect blueprint for me about how to go into the world. It's like everybody has their purpose and their own voice, but together you can make harmony. I tell a quick story. So I am doing this project called Eden, which we launched about 3 years ago, and it's been really the project of my life. And I bring a local children's choir at the end of this concert to sing a piece that was written by kids as a part of a workshop about looking at the world and getting them to sing about the world that they're entering. And we've done about 40 cities so far. We've had about 2,500 kids join, and we're on our way to Asia and South America next. It's very exciting. But 2 weeks ago, we were in ancient Olympia in Greece, and we have filmed a cinematic version of Eden. And this was filmed in Olympia because the theme for the Olympics this year is sustainability, and the idea of returning to the Olympic ideals, which is not just commerce and competition, but cooperation and respect and working together. And so this wonderful group of people looked at what Eden was, and they said, this needs to happen in ancient Olympia. So we brought a choir from Toulouse that sang with us a year ago. We got kids from the National Greek Opera, from their children's choir, and we brought back kids from El Sistema Greece, which is a refugee choir. They sang with us a year ago too, and we brought these 3 different choirs together. These kids, who were strangers at the start of this 2-day filming, were sitting on a hill in ancient Olympia, waiting for their turn to start filming, and they're singing for each other in Greek and then in French. And they're teaching each other songs, and they're dancing, and these kids from El Sistema that came from Iran and Sierra Leone, come from war, come from trauma, are on this hill with kids from the Greek choir in Athens and these beautiful kids from Toulouse as well. And they're equal. There's an immediate bond through language and song. And I just sat there. I mean, my days were 3:30 in the morning till 11:30 at night to try and do this. And I was just like, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And I was just destroyed. And it wasn't planned. It wasn't on the schedule. They did this because of their love of music. And they're looking to say, show me who you are. What does your music sound like? And we couldn't pull them away from each other. That's why I love choir.
You're pointing to something that makes you a truly unique performer, and I think it's the idea of selflessness within a medium of opera that is very self-ish, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of has to be. I just think it's amazing that you're this big opera star, but it's clear that your heart remains to bring other people to the spotlight. And to that point, we're both children of the 80s. We both love Billy Joel. But when I was singing Piano Man in my bathroom mirror, I was singing his part. You were singing the backup parts. Is it true that your biggest aspiration when you were younger was to be a backup singer for Billy Joel?
For Billy Joel. Not just anybody, but for Billy Joel. Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. And I thought, if I could just do that. I'm still available, Billy. I'm like, Billy!
And you heard him when you were 18?
He came to Kansas City on my 18th birthday, and my boyfriend at the time, Mark Howard, and I camped out months ahead of time to get the best tickets we could. I got 9th row, and you can take the girl out of Kansas, right? I bought a so embarrassing. I bought a bouquet of carnations to give to Billy Joel. And I made my way up to the stage, and they were white. They were very, very sad looking, but they're all I could afford. And he took them and he put them on the piano. It's one of my proudest moments. I don't know if he remembers that, but I do. It was my 18th birthday. Yeah.
That's a great way to spend it. Wow. So you'd end up after high school going to Wichita State to study vocal music education. And the end game was to return to high school, essentially to teach musical theater and choir. How and when do you start to veer away from that and toward a career in opera?
Yeah, so I very selfishly joined the opera at Wichita State because I got more scholarship money for it. I think it was an extra $250 a semester, which I needed. And so I joined the opera chorus. And at the same time I was double major with piano and voice, and I was taking voice lessons, and so of course the training is classical. I always loved being on stage, and I loved being in the choir, but I really never dared to think about, being a star. Just never was on my radar screen. And as I was studying the voice and then got involved in the opera, I feel like I sort of exploded from the inside out. It wasn't because I saw an opera that I went, oh, I have to do that. It was starting to sing these pieces and these arias, and the music was so beautiful, and the text was so, like it just did that to me. And
what was the first opera that got you?
I was Marcellina in The Marriage of Figaro.
That was the one that did
Yeah.
it.
My first role was the mother in Hansel and Gretel. I didn't get the good roles. I was Kate Pinkerton. I was Marcellina, not Carabino. I wasn't Hansel. I was the mother. But Marcellina, when I got to be funny, that Act 2 finale to this day blows me away. And I just thought, is this real life? What is that video? Is this real life? It's sort of like, does everybody get what's happening here? This is extraordinary. And at one point, because I was discovering this love, I'm going to try and answer your question and make that point too. I finished my ed degree, and I did student teaching in really, really rough schools in Wichita, Kansas. Very poor. You saw a lot of abuse. You saw a lot of poverty, a lot of difficult things everywhere. But in Wichita, we saw it there. And I was so torn because I thought these kids need a really good presence in their life in the classroom. And I felt really torn. This is my Catholic education coming. Vocation was the language at the table. I thought, I think I should be a teacher because there's such a need. But I really love to be on stage, so that must be bad. If it feels good, it must be bad. And I told my dad this, and he said, you know, Joyce, there's more than one way to educate people. And that was the key to unlocking, I think, to give myself permission to pursue this. And then I think about what I saw 2 weeks ago in Athens. I'm like, well, that would have never happened in Wichita, but I stayed. But coming back to my performance as well in Wichita, I got the one really good role I got there was Dorabella. And there was a stage, and I was singing it with Lucy McCoy. She was a graduate student, and I was in my last year of undergrad. And we had to be behind these two blinds. We were preset. And I remember, for the whole opening, and I remember looking at her, and I whispered, and I said, somebody out there's never heard this opera before. And it was just this like lightning bolt, and I felt like, oh, I have a responsibility here. And that has stayed with me, whether it's a concert, whether it's a recital, whether it's an opera. I know that there's at least one person that's going to experience this for the first time, and I love that. It's why I take what I do pretty seriously. It's like if you're going to introduce, you know, Dead Man Walking to somebody, you have to introduce it with integrity. Yeah.
After you graduate from Wichita State, you ended up at the Academy of Vocal Arts in Philadelphia, which is a real leap for you because it was the first time you're leaving Kansas.
It's the only place I applied to.
Oh, there's that too.
It's the only place I applied to because I didn't want to do book work. I wanted to get on stage. And at that time, it was the one that was really just get on stage. That's going to be your education. I had no plan B at all. I got rejected. And the head, Kevin McDowell, who ran it at the time, he said, I'm sorry, we don't have a place for you. I called him back and I said, I'll take anything. And he goes, no, we don't have any roles to offer you. I said, I don't care. I just want to study. You don't have to cast me in anything, and they didn't. Even years on, they didn't really. And I kind of bullied my way into that. And it was 3 years. I grew a very, very thick skin there. I learned a lot. I learned how to keep tears right here and say, yes, maestro, and go on with it. I learned how to prepare and perform an Italian recitative like nobody's business. I was surrounded by extraordinary artistry. Yeah, it was baptism by fire, and I wouldn't change a thing.
And you waitressed while you were in school to support yourself. Did you find it difficult to relate to other students who perhaps were born in big cities, exposed to the arts from a young age, and maybe didn't have to put themselves through school, maybe kind of like a person like me? Was that...
I didn't have time to think about you.
Good. Yeah.
I didn't have time.
Yeah.
I had a church job, so I went out to Lansing, Pennsylvania, and on Wednesday nights and early Sunday morning, I waited tables Friday and Saturday night, late Saturday night to early Sunday morning, and there was 1 year that I did telemarketing for the Philadelphia Singers. That was brutal. But I at one point was working 3 jobs while doing this full-time thing. I didn't have time. The one thing that was hard for me was I felt like I had so much inside of me and nobody was seeing it. And that's what frustrated me. And a lot of people were whizzing by me, and I couldn't understand why it wasn't being seen. Is your next card about Houston?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, I kind of sorted that out in Houston, but it was hard. And I to this day, I'm not sure why I stayed on the track. I don't know if it was belligerence. I don't know if it was naivete. There was something in me that I just wasn't ready to stop yet or give up.
I can vividly remember many frustrating practice sessions when I was at Juilliard, trying to keep up with the competition because I was the worst trumpet player in the school. And
really?
Well, yeah, somebody has to be, right? It's just a terrible feeling, but when you play an instrument, there's an element of putting your nose to the grindstone, and practice makes perfect, and you work through it. But with the voice, you can't muscle through things, right? You have to wait for your body to develop in a certain way and technique, and it takes time. So when you're at this amazing school surrounded by amazing singers, how did you deal with the frustration of other people being better than you, and you can't rush things as you're working on them?
I took the $25 bus, the Peter Pan bus line from Philly to New York, and I took weekly coachings here. I didn't wait for the school to give it to me. I knew that they didn't see it in me, and I thought, I've got to figure this out on my own. And I didn't have a lot of spare $25 bus fares, but I did it. And I took really consistent lessons that third year. And I was finding it on my own. I mean, I had good instructors and all of that, but that fortitude and that real desire to take it to not just the next level, but to the summit. I'm still working on it. But I know that it's my job and it's my responsibility. And so I didn't spend a lot of time going, oh, but they're doing this or they're doing that. I didn't go into that mentality. It's an inherently competitive business that we're in. I don't mind that. I use it for good. I'm like, I need more of that. She's amazing. I don't have to worry about that. And I try to do it like very objectively.
And then there was Houston. So your training would continue and heighten at the Houston Grand Opera's Young Artist Program. When you arrived, you were told that you were singing on youth and muscle, and this had to change 180 degrees.
In the first week.
Yeah.
I thought I'd arrived at the summit as a young artist, and that blew me away. But I was singing with my fingers crossed a little bit behind my back going, please work today. But you couldn't show that, and you couldn't tell anybody that. You had to act like you knew what you were doing. But there was for sure a technical limitation, and later on, a personal limitation that I just didn't know how to open and let it be what it was going to be. And so it was a 3-year project with him in Houston. And when I left there at 29, I had a sense of ownership about my technique and about my artistry that then when it did sort of open for me, I was ready. Yeah.
I want to ask you about that particular moment. So, like I said, I was a late bloomer on the trumpet, and I can remember a specific performance when I was in school after I had worked with a particular teacher, and everything physically kind of came together. I had a degree of control and power and finesse that I hadn't experienced, and it was something that came together in a performance, and it was probably one of the best moments of my life. It was amazing.
You were aware as it was happening?
100%.
Wow.
Yeah. Did it come together similarly and all of a sudden for you?
No. When the end of my first year in Houston, so I was 27, we were doing a concert for the donors, the people who had given, we got like $17,000 for the year, I think. And so it's all of us young artists and all the donors there, and you're thinking, now they're going to see if they got their money's worth. And I sang Non più mesta, Cenerentola, and I not only cracked, but I completely obliterated all 3 of the final high Bs. Okay, don't worry, there's another one, Joyce. And I cracked all 3 of them. And my teacher came up and he hugged me, said, I'm so proud of you. It means you're letting go. Because I was just in that changing over the technique, and the impulse was to keep it safe and hold it and make it work, which is of course the last thing I needed to be doing. And so I was baby step the whole time. And I never considered there a big break. But there was a shift in my mind that is very concrete for me. And I wasn't singing. I was in the rehearsal room, the Chicago Lyric Opera, covering Jennifer Larmore as Ruggiero in Alcina. Renee Fleming was the Alcina, Natalie Dessay was the Morgana. Rockwell Blake was the tenor. I don't remember his name, whatever that role is.
Nobody cares about the tenor.
Okay. And thank you. You words right out of my mouth. And Jennifer Larmore. And I was one of the covers in the corner of the room where you don't speak unless you're spoken to, and then do it with caution. And I was really prepared. I was singing well. And I just remember thinking, if I had to go on, I think I could hold my own. I'm not saying I would have set the world on fire. I wasn't, thinking that way at all. But it was just like, there was a shift in my thing of like, I'm ready for this. And I know what I'm doing. And that was a kind of before and after moment, but I didn't sing a note with it. Yeah.
You're now in such high demand that taking auditions for roles must seem like a million years ago. Yeah, you even just flinched.
Thank God, thank goodness.
Right. But at one point, it was the bane of your existence. What was that first audition tour like? I think it was something like 13 auditions in 16 days?
So I did the Operalia competition. I did it first in Japan, didn't do too well, but I got invited back the next year in Hamburg, and I placed second. And at that point, I had auditioned for all the New York agents. I was 28, leaving the Houston studio, 29. And nobody was taking me. And I had work at Tulsa Opera and Arizona Opera, a Hansel and a Rosina. And I thought, I'm going to support myself through singing now. I don't have to wait tables anymore. But that I really was anticipating a very good regional career in America. That's the track that I thought I was on. And I did the Operalia competition. And I got a phone call from a London agent, and he said, I think you're going to be a superstar, and I want to represent you worldwide. And I went, okay. I'd never heard that kind of language, never heard that language before. And he said, but you have to come over here and sing because nobody here knows you. I said, okay. And we picked December, great month, to trek around Europe. And it was very improvised. It's like, oh, they can see you in Nancy tomorrow if you come. So I did literally 13 cities in 16 days, not congruently by any means. And they were mostly B and C level houses. And I got 12 immediate rejections from Scottish opera and Antwerp and, very houses I would have been thrilled to sing in. And my last audition was the only A-level house that I sang for, and it was Paris Opera. And an hour and a half later, they were offering me a new production of The Barber of Seville. I would say that was my break, but I think the reason I got that job, Hugues Gall was running the Paris Opera at the same time. He was working a lot with Francesca Zambello. And Francesca had just directed me as Kate Pinkerton in Madame Butterfly, and she thought I was smart. I don't think she ever commented on my voice, but she's like, you're smart, you're quick. And I know she spoke to Hugues Gall, said, keep an eye on this young American, she's smart. So he listened to me with a different set of ears and gave me an opportunity that these other houses didn't. And was that luck? A little bit. But also, what if I hadn't really embraced Kate Pinkerton? Maybe that I would have missed that opportunity. And I sang Kate Pinkerton well there because I also did her at AVA and at Wichita State. So it's like, what is the break? It's that I prepared well at Wichita State. And then I paid more attention at AVA. And everything, domino by domino, leads me to Lincoln Center, speaking soundly with you,
there you go.
David.
Yeah. Well, now I just feel bad for you. So what my experience also is the best thing about taking auditions is it only takes one to stop taking auditions. And that very much happened to you because by 2005, I get a chance to hear you for the first time because when you made your Met debut, I was in the orchestra and I got to hear you in that performance, and it was amazing. Any Met debut, I would imagine, is very special. This was perhaps even more special given the fact that even though your father was ill and would unfortunately pass away shortly thereafter, he made it to the Met for that performance. So talk to me about not only making your big debut at the Met, but having your father there.
What he said to me after is he looked at me and he goes, "So you're really doing this?" and it was, I mean, talk about a Midwestern outlook on life. It was, there was a sense of awe and sort of wonder, and I think he probably felt like, is this really real? And I looked at him and I was like, yeah, Dad, I'm really doing it. And that was a gift to know that he was able to experience that and have that realization along with me. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I'm going to edit the next part out of the podcast because it's about me for a second, because it's very similar. That piece that I talked about, that when everything came together, was Mahler's Seventh Symphony. It was the first trumpet part I got when I was in school, and everything really came together. My wife was there, and my parents were there. It was a great night. Fast forward to when James Levine conducted it at the Met, and we're at Carnegie Hall. And my father was ill with cancer. We were hoping that he was gonna make it, and it was not great, but he always kept saying, I'm gonna come to that Mahler 7 because it was so amazing when you were in school and you were dating that nice girl who ended up being your wife. And he goes, I'm gonna come. And he died right around New Year's, and this concert was like December, what was it, Kristen? Yeah, like the 22nd. I know I'm already talking too much about me, but I got the microphone. So my dad made it in, and unfortunately passed away shortly after that. But that particular piece, then the emotional weight of playing it was awful at the time, but I'm so happy for the experience. So I can only imagine that must have felt tenfold for you, having your father there at the debut.
Okay, first of all, in order for me to continue this podcast, I need you to guarantee me that you're going to put that in and not cut it out.
We'll see.
Otherwise, I will not sign my release. We want to hear that story.
All right, fine.
We want to hear that story. The Met, he was not well, but it didn't feel like he was going to pass imminently. The harder part was I was in Madrid doing Ariadne, and he fell ill and went into the ICU, and I came home early and spent the last few weeks with him. And my next show was Idomeneo in Paris. I think I had to leave about a week after the funeral. So I'd been at home, we'd gone through all that, I'd had my time with my family. I said, okay, well, I have to get back to work. And I was at Paris, and I was late to rehearsals, so it was like a day and then I was curtain up, and all of a sudden I'm singing Il Padre Adorato, lo perdo, lo perdo. I mean, those aren't the right words, but I just found my father and now I've lost him again. And it was a Luc Bondy production, so everything was very angst, and I was curled up in a fetal position singing this. And the curtain came down right after that, and I've never experienced anything quite like that. And I realized with time later that, especially because it was Mozart, but it was moving things through me that I wasn't remotely prepared to process, but it didn't allow it to be stuck. And I've had some uncanny parallels between roles and timings of performances and what's happening in my real life. There's a book in there, I suppose, at some point. Those kinds of experiences, I'm sure for you, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but with the Mahler, it's that mystical thing that happens where you go out of time and space, and there's a connection that is quite visceral. And it's all, it doesn't exist, it's just waves, you can't find it, you can't hold it, and once you put it out, it's gone. And yet how those performances stay with us. and how it still connects us to that moment, to those people, to that emotion. It's quite an extraordinary thing we get to do. Yeah.
Well, Joyce, now that I brought the room down, I can't thank you enough. This has been such an amazing experience. Forget about them. For me, just to be able to talk to you, I'm as bewildered by your artistry and your voice as everybody else in the audience, so thank you so much.
Oh, you're so kind. Yeah. Thank you. I'm very honored.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you to all of you for coming. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Speaking Soundly. If you like what you heard, please tell your friends about it. Spread the word. Be sure to follow, rate us, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. To keep up on future episodes, follow us on Instagram at SpeakingSNDLY and visit our website, artfulnarrativesmedia.com. Tune in next week as we hear another inspiring artist speaking soundly.